The gavel slammed down, cutting through the tense silence of the federal courtroom in New York City like a judge's final verdict on a life sentence. Jaxson Harper stood tall on the witness stand, his broad shoulders squared in a tailored navy suit, blue eyes scanning the packed gallery until they locked onto Elias Rossi's face in the third row. "Your Honor," Jaxson said, his voice steady yet carrying the weight of 2 years of lies. "Before I testify against the Rossi crime family, there's something every person in this room needs to hear. I'm gay, and the man I love is sitting right there, Elias Rossi. My relationship with him while undercover is what brought down this entire syndicate." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave crashing against concrete walls. Elias's olive skin paled instantly, his dark wavy hair catching the overhead lights as his hands gripped the wooden bench in front of him. The judge banged the gavel again for order, but the revelation had already ignited something unstoppable. Reporters scribbled furiously in the back rows while federal agents exchanged glances. For Jaxson, this was not just courtroom drama. It was the moment his hidden world collided with the truth he had buried since childhood. To understand how a decorated FBI detective reached this point, you have to go back 2 years to a rainy afternoon in a dimly lit Brooklyn field office. Jaxson, 32 and built like someone who ran 5 miles before dawn every day, had just received his marching orders from Special Agent Ramirez. "The Rossi family has evaded us for a decade," Ramirez said, sliding a thick file across the table. "Marco Rossi runs extortion, money laundering, and protection rackets from Little Italy to the Bronx. His son Elias is the weak link, art student by day, reluctant heir by night. You go in as Jack Harlan, a slick investor from Chicago looking for clean fronts. Get close, gather evidence, and get out." Jaxson nodded, but inside his chest tightened. Growing up in a small Texas town where his father preached Sunday sermons about manhood and family values, Jaxson had learned to hide who he was before he even understood it. College in New York had been a brief window of freedom, stolen nights, and whispered confessions, but the badge demanded silence. Relationships never lasted because the job always came first. Now, this assignment felt like stepping onto a tightrope over an abyss. His cover was airtight: fake bank accounts, a rented loft in Soho, even a fabricated criminal record that checked out on every database. Jaxson started frequenting the upscale bars where Rossi crew members unwound after long days of business. The first time he saw Elias was at a place called the Velvet Lantern on a humid July evening. Elias, 28 with that effortless charm and a smile that softened the sharp lines of his jaw, sat alone nursing a whiskey. Their eyes met across the polished oak bar, and something electric passed between them. "New face in town?" Elias asked, sliding onto the stool beside him with natural ease. Jaxson forced a confident grin. "Business brought me here. Looking for opportunities." They talked for hours, about the city's hidden gems, about dreams that felt bigger than bloodlines. Elias opened up just enough to hint at the pressure from his father to marry, produce heirs, and take over the family empire. "Sometimes I wonder what life would look like if I could just paint and disappear," he confessed quietly. Jaxson listened, his undercover mask blending seamlessly with genuine curiosity. By closing time, they had exchanged numbers, and Jaxson knew the mission had just become dangerously personal. Over the following weeks, their meetings multiplied. Coffee in quiet cafes in Williamsburg, long walks through Central Park where the autumn leaves crunched under their shoes. Jaxson fed intel back to Ramirez, names, dates, shipment routes, but every conversation with Elias chipped away at the wall he had built around his heart. Elias spoke of feeling trapped, of late-night arguments with Marco about tradition and duty. "He doesn't see me, Jack. He sees the next boss." Jaxson wanted to say he understood that invisibility better than anyone, but the words stayed locked inside. One stormy October night, Elias invited him to his apartment overlooking the East River. Dinner turned into deep conversation, and when their hands brushed reaching for the same wine glass, the air shifted. The kiss that followed was hesitant at first, then filled with years of unspoken longing. For Jaxson, it was the first time in forever he felt truly seen. For Elias, it was a spark of hope in a world that demanded he conform. As rain lashed the windows, they pulled back, breathing hard, eyes searching each other. "This changes everything," Elias whispered. Jaxson could only nod, the weight of his double life pressing down harder than ever. Yet secrets never stay buried. Jackson's handler warned him repeatedly to maintain distance, but the heart ignores orders. Elias's closest friend Tony, a loyal Rossi enforcer with a suspicious streak, started asking questions. "You and that Harlan guy spending a lot of time together," Tony remarked during a tense family dinner at Marco's brownstone. Elias laughed it off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, Jaxson began piecing together how the syndicate operated, not just with money and muscle, but with leverage over people's hidden lives. Marco had a reputation for destroying anyone who stepped out of line, using their deepest vulnerabilities as weapons. The irony stung. Here Jaxson was falling for the one man whose family would never accept the truth. The first real crack appeared 6 months in. Elias borrowed Jackson's phone during a late-night conversation and saw a notification from an encrypted FBI app. "Who the hell are you really?" he demanded, voice cracking with hurt. Jaxson tried to explain without blowing the entire operation, but Elias stormed out into the night, convinced he had been used as a pawn. The misunderstanding tore through both of them like shrapnel. Elias confronted his father in private, feeding Marco just enough suspicion to tighten security around the family businesses. Jaxson was pulled into deeper cover, attending high-risk meetings and gathering the evidence that would eventually fill court binders. Nights alone in his loft, he stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Elias and wondering if love had cost him the case, or if the case had already cost him the only real thing he had ever found. Back in the present courtroom, the judge restored order with sharp commands. Jaxson continued his testimony, voice unwavering. "My relationship with Elias started as part of the cover, but it became the only honest thing in my life. The Rossi family built power by exploiting secrets like mine. Today I refuse to let them hide anymore." Elias rose slowly from his seat, the entire room turning toward him. Their eyes met again, and in that single glance years of pain and longing passed unspoken. The empire was already beginning to fracture. The federal agents in the back row shifted uncomfortably as Elias stood, his tailored shirt slightly rumpled from hours of sitting through testimony. "He's telling the truth," Elias said clearly, his Italian-American accent cutting through the murmurs. "I love him, and I'm finished pretending." The judge called for a brief recess, but the damage was irreversible. Cameras flashed outside the windows as word spread through the media corridor. Jaxson stepped down from the stand, legs steady only because he had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times during sleepless nights. Inside, his pulse hammered with relief and terror. Coming out in front of the world had been the plan, the final card to force the syndicate's collapse. Yet nothing prepared him for the raw exposure. Flashback to the weeks after Elias discovered the truth about Jackson's identity. The safe house in Queens became their neutral ground, arranged through back channels with Ramirez's reluctant approval. Elias arrived first that cold November evening, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, eyes red from lack of sleep. "You lied to me every single day," he said the moment Jaxson walked through the door. The accusation hung heavy between them. Jaxson set down the takeout bags, removing his jacket slowly. "At first it was the job, but after that first kiss everything changed. I fell in love with you, Elias. Not the cover, not the case, you." They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, the city lights flickering through half-drawn blinds. Elias listened as Jaxson explained the assignment, the evidence collected, the way Marco's empire relied on fear and silence. "Your father uses people's secrets the same way he used tradition to control you," Jaxson said quietly. "I couldn't walk away from you even when I knew I should." Elias's anger slowly melted into something more complicated. grief mixed with understanding. He shared stories of his own hidden struggles, the nights he drove alone to the Brooklyn Bridge wondering if he could ever live openly. Dad always said a real Rossi man provides, marries, continues the bloodline. Anything else is weakness. They talked until dawn, hands eventually finding each other across the table. The reconciliation was tentative, built on honesty that tasted both bitter and sweet. Jaxson revealed how his Texas upbringing had taught him shame before he learned pride. Elias spoke of the art scholarship he turned down because Marco demanded loyalty first. By morning they had a fragile agreement. Use their connection to gather the final pieces of evidence. Elias would feed Jaxson details from inside the family, risking everything. In return, Jaxson promised protection and a future beyond the trial. The following months tested them both. Tony, Elias's childhood friend and crew member, confronted him one afternoon at a warehouse in Red Hook. "I saw you with Harlan, or whoever he really is. You know what Marco does to people who betray blood." Elias stood his ground, voice low. "This isn't betrayal. This is choosing to live." Tony walked away conflicted, their lifelong bond strained but not yet broken. Jaxson meanwhile deepened his infiltration, attending late-night meetings where Marco discussed new rackets. Each piece of evidence, wire transfers, witness lists, blackmail files, brought the case closer to indictment. But the personal cost mounted. Jackson's mother called from Texas after a leaked memo reached local news. "Son, the church is talking. Your father won't say it, but we love you. Just come home safe." The words cracked something inside him he didn't know was still fragile. Elias faced his own family storm. Marco summoned him to the brownstone study, cigar smoke curling around leather-bound books. "I hear rumors about you and that investor. Fix it before it becomes a problem." Elias met his father's stare without flinching for the first time. "Maybe the problem is the way we've always done things." Marco's face darkened, but he let it go, for now. The tension fueled Jaxson and Elias's secret meetings, stolen moments in the safe house where they could drop every mask. One night, after a particularly close call with a rival gang shooting, Elias held Jaxson tightly. "If we survive this, I want a life where we don't have to hide." Jaxson kissed his forehead, the promise settling deep in his bones. The arrest warrants dropped on a crisp January morning. SWAT teams swept through Rossi properties while Jaxson watched from a command van, heart in his throat. Elias had been placed in protective custody the night before, his testimony already secured. Marco was taken into custody cursing the name Harlan. The media dubbed it the biggest organized crime bust in a decade, but they had no idea the personal story behind it. Jaxson spent the weeks before trial in isolation, preparing his testimony and replaying every decision that led him here. His FBI colleagues offered mixed support. Some clapped him on the back, others avoided eye contact. The LGBT community reached out through quiet channels, sending messages of solidarity that Jaxson read late at night with tears he refused to acknowledge. Elias struggled too. Cut off from his family money and name, he stayed in a small government apartment painting to stay sane. His sister Sophia snuck him a message. "I'm proud of you, little brother. Dad will come around or he won't, but you did the right thing." The support from unexpected places kept him going. When the trial date arrived, both men knew the courtroom would become the stage for their final act of courage. Now, back in the present, the recess ended and Jaxson returned to the stand. The prosecutor guided him through the evidence, each document linking Marco's empire to years of corruption. Elias sat quietly, his presence a silent anchor. The defense attorney tried to discredit Jaxson, painting him as a liar who seduced a vulnerable young man for information. "Objection," the prosecutor called, but the damage was attempted. Jaxson answered every question with calm precision, refusing to let shame creep back in. "I didn't seduce anyone. We fell in love despite the lies, and that love exposed the truth." The gallery murmured approval. Outside the courthouse that evening reporters swarmed, but Jaxson and Elias slipped out a side entrance under agent escort. In the back of a tinted SUV, their hands found each other again. "You did it," Elias whispered. Jaxson smiled for the first time in weeks. "We did it." Yet both knew the real battle, family acceptance, societal judgment, rebuilding lives, was only beginning. The city lights blurred past the windows as they drove toward an uncertain but honest future. The next morning, the newspapers screamed headlines across New York and beyond. FBI detective comes out in court. Rossi empire crumbles. Jaxson stared at his phone in the safe apartment the bureau had arranged, coffee growing cold in his hand. Photos of him on the stand and Elias rising to speak filled every feed. His phone buzzed with messages. Old friends from Texas offering awkward support, colleagues sending thumbs-up emojis, and strangers from LGBT organizations thanking him for visibility. Yet the weight of exposure pressed on his chest. He had spent years crafting a version of himself the world would accept. Now that version lay in pieces on the courtroom floor. Elias arrived an hour later carrying 2 paper bags of fresh bagels and a tentative smile. "Sophia sent these from the old bakery. Said you looked like you needed carbs after yesterday." They ate in silence at first, the city humming outside the windows. "My father called from jail," Elias said finally. "He told me I'm dead to him. No Rossi blood in a traitor." The words landed heavy, but Elias's eyes held steady. Jaxson reached across the table, thumb brushing Elias's knuckles. "You're not dead to me. That's what matters now." They spent the day mapping out next steps. Elias would testify later in the week. Jaxson would finish his own statements. In between, they allowed themselves small moments of normalcy. Watching old movies, Elias sketching Jackson's profile on scrap paper. Quiet conversations about dreams they had never voiced aloud. The trial dragged on for weeks, each day peeling back layers of the syndicate's operations. Jaxson watched from the gallery when Elias took the stand, heart swelling with pride as his partner detailed years of coercion and fear. "My father built power on silence," Elias told the jury. "He taught us that weakness destroys families. But hiding who I am was the real weakness." The courtroom listened in rapt attention. Defense lawyers attacked Elias's credibility, suggesting he had been manipulated by Jaxson. But the evidence, bank records, recorded calls, witness testimonies, proved too overwhelming. Tony, caught between loyalty and conscience, surprised everyone by taking the stand as a cooperating witness. "I saw what Marco did to people who didn't fit his mold," Tony admitted. "Elias is my brother in every way that counts. I couldn't let it continue." The betrayal from within accelerated the collapse. Outside the legal drama, Jackson's personal world shifted in unexpected ways. His mother flew up from Texas for a weekend, hugging him tightly at the airport. "Your father is struggling with the news," she confessed over diner coffee. "But he loves you. He just needs time to understand a world different from the one he grew up in." They visited the 9/11 memorial together, walking in silence until she stopped and turned to him. "I always knew there was something you carried alone. I'm sorry I never asked." The conversation healed fractures Jaxson hadn't realized still ached. Elias joined them for dinner one evening, nerves visible until Jackson's mother pulled him into a warm embrace. "Any man who makes my son smile like that is welcome in our family." Small victories accumulated like building blocks. Elias faced his own reckoning with the past. He met with a counselor arranged through victim services, unpacking years of conditional love from Marco. Art became his anchor again. He set up a small studio in the safe apartment and painted late into the night. Vibrant cityscapes mixed with abstract portraits of Jaxson that captured strength and vulnerability. "This is me finally seeing clearly," he told Jaxson one evening, holding up a canvas glowing with warm colors. Their relationship deepened in the quiet spaces between court dates. No longer hidden, they walked hand in hand through parks, ate in neighborhood restaurants, and faced curious glances with quiet defiance. One Sunday, they attended a small LGBT support group in Chelsea where strangers shared stories of coming out. Jaxson spoke briefly about the courtroom moment, voice thick with emotion. Elias squeezed his hand the entire time. Yet challenges persisted. Conservative media outlets ran segments questioning whether Jackson's personal life compromised the investigation. Online comments ranged from supportive to vicious. Jaxson received a few threatening messages tied to former Rossi associates still on the street. Agents doubled security, but the psychological toll showed in restless nights and moments of doubt. "Did I do the right thing?" he asked Elias during one particularly dark hour. Elias pulled him close. "You gave us both a chance at truth. That's always right." Their love became the steady compass through the storm. As the trial neared its end, closing arguments painted two very different pictures. The prosecution highlighted Jackson's bravery and the human cost of organized crime. The defense portrayed the entire case as a personal vendetta fueled by a romantic affair. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the morning of the verdict, Jaxson and Elias sat together in the front row, shoulders touching. Marco stared straight ahead, face carved from stone. When the foreman read "guilty" on all counts, the courtroom erupted. Marco was led away in cuffs, eyes finally meeting Elias's with a mixture of rage and something almost like regret. Outside on the courthouse steps, cameras waited, but Jaxson and Elias slipped away again. In the quiet of their temporary home, they celebrated with takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine Elias had saved for this moment. "To new beginnings," Jaxson toasted. Elias smiled, the glow of the city lights softening his features. "To us, finally free." The verdict brought relief, but both men knew rebuilding would take time. Careers to redefine, families to reconcile, identities to fully embrace. For the first time in years, Jaxson felt the future stretching ahead without shadows. The months following the verdict unfolded like chapters in a book neither man had dared to write. Jaxson returned to the FBI but requested a transfer to a training division where his experience could help younger agents navigate undercover work without losing themselves. "I learned the hard way that secrets destroy more than they protect," he told Ramirez during the exit interview. Ramirez nodded with respect. "You changed the game, Harper. Proud to have served with you." The new role gave Jaxson regular hours and space to breathe, something he had never known. Elias, cleared of any involvement, used his testimony money to enroll in a part-time MFA program at a local art college. His paintings began appearing in small gallery shows, each piece layered with themes of identity and freedom that resonated with critics. "This is my voice," he explained at his first opening, Jaxson standing proudly beside him. Family reconciliation proved slower but meaningful. Jackson's father finally called one evening, voice gruff from years of Sunday sermons. "Son, I don't understand everything, but I understand love when I see it. Come home for Christmas if you want." The invitation felt like a bridge being rebuilt one plank at a time. Elias's sister Sophia became a regular visitor, bringing news from the scattered Rossi relatives who were slowly distancing themselves from Marco's legacy. "Dad refuses visitors," she reported once. "But the empire is gone. You two did that." Tony reached out too, meeting them for coffee in neutral territory. "I chose the right side," he said simply. "Family isn't just blood." The conversations healed old wounds and forged new bonds. Societal pressure continued in subtler forms. Jaxson and Elias received invitations to speak at LGBT events across the city, panel discussions, youth centers, even a documentary crew asking for interviews. At first Jaxson hesitated, the spotlight still feeling too bright. Elias encouraged him gently. "Your story helped me find mine. Maybe it helps someone else." Their first joint appearance at a community center in Harlem drew a packed room of young men navigating their own journeys. Jaxson spoke about the fear of losing everything, Elias about the courage to claim love anyway. The standing ovation left both men humbled and grateful. Challenges still surfaced. A former Rossi associate on parole made vague threats through anonymous channels, prompting temporary security again. Media outlets occasionally dredged up the gay cop scandal for clicks. Elias's MFA cohort included a few judgmental peers who whispered about his famous trial connection. Through it all they leaned on each other. Evening walks along the Brooklyn waterfront became ritual, hands linked openly as they discussed the day. "Remember when we couldn't even hold hands in public?" Elias asked one sunset. Jaxson laughed softly. "Now I can't imagine not doing it." Their intimacy grew in quiet ways. Shared cooking experiments, weekend drives upstate, lazy mornings where conversation flowed without the shadow of secrets. One pivotal weekend, they traveled to Texas for Jackson's family Christmas. The small town greeted them with curious stares and a few awkward questions. But his mother's warm kitchen and his father's quiet acceptance set the tone. On Christmas Eve around the tree, Jaxson watched Elias help his young nieces decorate cookies and felt something settle deep inside. This was the life he had fought for, ordinary, honest, loved. Back in New York, they celebrated New Year's Eve at a rooftop party hosted by new friends from the support group. Fireworks exploded over the skyline as they kissed at midnight, the city cheering around them. Yet growth demanded facing remaining shadows. Jaxson began therapy to process the years of compartmentalizing his identity. Elias worked through guilt over his father's downfall, recognizing that justice and love could coexist. They attended couples counseling together, learning tools to communicate through triggers and old fears. "I never want us to hide again," Jaxson said during one session. The therapist smiled. "Then keep choosing truth every day." The work strengthened them. Professionally, Jaxson thrived in his new role, mentoring agents on the human side of undercover work. Elias's art gained traction, leading to a solo gallery show titled Unmasked that featured pieces inspired by their journey. The opening night drew supporters from every part of their lives: FBI colleagues, family members, community leaders. Standing in front of a large canvas depicting two figures emerging from shadows into light, Jaxson slipped his arm around Elias. "This is us," he whispered. Elias nodded, eyes shining. Spring brought new beginnings. They moved into a modest apartment in Queens with big windows for Elias's studio and a backyard for weekend barbecues. Friends gathered often, laughter filling rooms once dominated by tension. Jaxson proposed one ordinary Tuesday evening over pizza on the couch, simple ring in hand. "Marry me, Elias. Let's build the life we almost lost." Tears and laughter followed, the yes resounding clear and certain. Planning a small wedding became joyful work, invitations sent to those who had stood by them. As summer approached, the trial's final appeals were denied. Marco would serve life, the syndicate dismantled piece by piece. Jaxson and Elias visited the memorial wall where names of victims were listed, paying silent respect. "We didn't just survive," Jaxson said. "We won." Elias leaned into him. "And we get to keep winning every day." Their story, once hidden in shadows, now stood in full light, a testament to love's power to transform fear into freedom. The wedding took place on a perfect September afternoon in a small park overlooking the Hudson River. String lights twinkled in the trees as Jaxson stood at the simple altar in a light gray suit. Heart full as Elias approached, wearing a matching one with a single white rose pinned to his lapel. Their families filled the chairs: Jackson's parents from Texas, Sophia and her husband from the city, Tony with his wife and kids, even a few FBI friends who had become true allies. No grand spectacle, just the people who mattered. When the officiant asked for vows, Jaxson spoke first, voice steady. "Elias, you taught me that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing love even when the world tells you to hide. I promise to stand beside you openly, every single day." Elias's eyes glistened. "Jaxson, you walked into my life as a stranger and became my truth. I promise to build a home with you where our love is never a secret again." Rings exchanged. They kissed to cheers and tears. The reception featured laughter, dancing under the stars, and toasts that celebrated not just their union, but the journey that brought them here. Life after the wedding settled into a rhythm both men cherished. Mornings began with coffee on their small balcony, Elias sketching while Jaxson read case files for training sessions. Weekends involved gallery visits, family brunches, and quiet nights where they simply existed together without looking over their shoulders. Jaxson's mentoring work expanded. He started a support program for undercover agents struggling with identity issues, drawing directly from his own experiences. Agents from across the country reached out, sharing stories that mirrored his past fears. "You're changing lives," Elias told him proudly after one particularly meaningful session. Elias's art career blossomed. His series Unmasked toured smaller museums, each piece telling fragments of their story without ever naming names. Critics praised the raw humanity, the way light broke through darkness on canvas. At one opening in Boston, a young man approached them shyly. "Your work gave me the courage to come out to my family last month." "Thank you." The encounter left both men speechless with gratitude. They began volunteering at youth centers, sharing age-appropriate versions of their journey to help teenagers navigate similar paths. Watching young faces light up with hope reminded them why the courtroom risk had been worth everything. Challenges still arrived uninvited. Marco attempted one last appeal from prison, claiming coercion, but the courts dismissed it swiftly. The news stirred old anxieties, yet Jaxson and Elias faced it together, stronger for the years of practice. Jackson's father visited New York for the first time, spending a week exploring museums with Elias and talking late into the night about faith, love, and change. "I was wrong about a lot," he admitted to Jaxson privately. "Seeing you two together taught me more than any sermon." The healing felt complete. Their circle of friends grew. Tony and his family became regular fixtures at backyard barbecues, the children calling Jaxson and Elias uncles without hesitation. Sophia announced her own pregnancy, asking them to be godfathers. Life expanded in beautiful directions. One summer they traveled to Italy, visiting the small village where Marco's parents had emigrated from decades ago. Standing in ancient olive groves, Elias felt the weight of heritage without the chains. "This is where it began," he said softly. "And here is where we choose how it continues." They returned with renewed appreciation for roots that no longer define them. Professionally, Jaxson received recognition for his training innovations, invited to speak at national conferences. Elias landed a teaching position at the art college, guiding students to find their authentic voices. Evenings often involved collaborative projects, Jaxson helping design exhibition layouts, Elias offering creative input on training materials. Their partnership extended beyond romance into mutual support that felt effortless. Fall brought reflection. On the anniversary of the courtroom revelation, they returned to the federal building, standing quietly on the steps. "2 years ago, I thought coming out would end everything," Jaxson said. Elias smiled. "Instead, it began the best part." They walked home hand in hand, the city alive around them. That night, they hosted a small dinner for close friends, toasting to growth and second chances. Conversations flowed easily, stories shared without shame. Winter arrived with cozy nights by the fireplace in their new brownstone, a purchase made possible by careful saving and Elias's growing art sales. They decorated together, hanging ornaments that held meaning. A tiny gavel from the trial, a paintbrush from Elias's first solo show, a Texas star for Jackson's roots. Christmas morning they exchanged gifts. Jaxson received a custom portrait of the two of them painted by Elias. Elias opened plane tickets to Hawaii for their delayed honeymoon. Laughter filled the house as snow fell softly outside. Through every season their love proved resilient. Misunderstandings still occurred, old habits of secrecy died hard, but they addressed them openly, growing closer each time. Jaxson learned to voice fears before they festered. Elias learned to trust without needing constant reassurance. Their bond became a living example of the acceptance they had fought so hard to claim. Spring marked another milestone. Jaxson and Elias finalized adoption paperwork for a young teenager named Marcus who had aged out of the foster system and needed stability. The boy, quiet at first, warmed to their home through shared meals and art lessons from Elias. Watching Marcus blossom reminded them daily of the power of chosen family. "We get to give someone else the chance we almost lost," Jaxson said one evening as they watched Marcus sketch at the kitchen table. Elias nodded, hand resting on Jackson's shoulder. The future stretched bright ahead. Years later, the city skyline still glittered beyond their brownstone windows, but the lives inside had expanded in ways neither man could have imagined on that fateful courtroom day. Jaxson, now a senior instructor at the FBI Academy, traveled occasionally to teach new recruits about the human cost of undercover work. Elias ran a thriving community art studio that offered free classes to at-risk youth, many of whom saw in him a role model who had chosen truth over fear. Their son Marcus, now a confident college student studying social work, often joined family dinners with stories of his own advocacy work. The house echoed with laughter, debates about art and justice, and the steady rhythm of a life built on honesty. One crisp autumn evening, they hosted a gathering to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the verdict that changed everything. Old friends filled the rooms, Tony with his grown children, Sophia and her family, Jackson's parents who now visited several times a year, Ramirez retired but still sharp. Stories flowed freely. The rainy night they first met, the painful misunderstanding that nearly ended them, the courtroom bombshell that set them free. Laughter mixed with quiet reflection as they remembered those who hadn't made it to this side of justice. Jaxson stood to offer a toast, glass raised. To the courage it takes to live openly and the love that makes it possible. Elias's eyes met his across the room, the same spark present after all these years. Later, when guests had gone and Marcus was upstairs studying, Jaxson and Elias sat on the back porch under string lights. "Sometimes I still can't believe we made it," Jaxson said softly. Elias leaned against him, head on his shoulder. "We didn't just make it. We built something better." They watched the city lights twinkle, hands intertwined, the journey from shadows to sunlight complete. The syndicate was a distant memory, replaced by a legacy of hope. Young people across the country still reached out through social media, sharing how their story had inspired coming-out conversations or career changes. Jaxson and Elias answered every message, paying forward the support they had received. Their daily life remained beautifully ordinary. Morning runs together through the neighborhood, Elias teaching weekend workshops while Jaxson prepared lesson plans, family vacations where Marcus introduced them to new adventures. They attended pride parades not as symbols but as ordinary husbands celebrating love. The world had changed too, more acceptance, more visibility, yet they knew the fight continued for others still hiding. One quiet morning Elias found Jaxson staring at an old photo from the trial, the one captured the moment their eyes met across the courtroom. "Regrets?" Elias asked gently. Jaxson shook his head. "Only that I waited so long to live honestly." They framed the photo and hung it in the hallway, a reminder rather than a burden. Life moved forward with purpose. Jaxson published a book on ethical undercover work that became required reading at academies. Elias's art continued to win awards, each piece carrying subtle messages of resilience. Marcus graduated and moved into his own apartment nearby, still calling weekly for advice and Sunday dinners. As another decade approached, they planned a simple renewal of vows in the same park where they married. The circle had grown. Friends, family, former students, ments, all gathered to witness love that had withstood every test. Standing under the same trees, now taller and stronger, Jaxson and Elias exchanged new promises reflecting the wisdom of years. "I choose you every day, in every version of ourselves," Jaxson said. Elias smiled. "And I choose the truth we built together." The kiss that followed drew cheers that echoed across the water. Looking back from this vantage point, the journey felt both impossible and inevitable. The undercover assignment that began as duty became destiny. The coming out moment that shocked a courtroom became the foundation for countless lives touched by their courage. Family expectations that once divided now united. Societal pressures that once silenced now amplified their voices. Through misunderstandings, betrayals, sacrifices, and hard-won truths, both men had grown into versions of themselves they could finally recognize in the mirror. The city continued its endless rhythm around them, but inside their home peace reigned. On a warm spring evening years later, they sat on the porch once more, watching Marcus arrive with his own partner for dinner. Laughter drifted through open windows. Jaxson turned to Elias, the man who had walked every step beside him. "Worth it?" he asked quietly. Elias's answer came without hesitation, eyes shining with the same love that had started it all in a Brooklyn bar. "Every single moment, true or false. Coming out is always the right choice when love and justice are on the line, no matter the personal cost."